Alright, I know this might sound crazy, but for some context, what started me on this path was a recent top 10, the souls that can be in Golden Freddy video. And having needed another number to make it an even 10, I decided to suggest that Golden Freddy didn't have any soul inside them. But then that moved to them just being a hallucination, and then I remembered that the thing is, with hallucinations, they're not real. So, yeah, my friend didn't really see panthers on the subway, he was just hallucinating them. And there's whole stories about pink elephants and all that because people see them while hallucinating. So, if Golden Freddy is really just a hallucination, what would this mean for the series, and is it even possible? Well, that's what we're exploring today. Let's do it. Alright, first things first, could Golden Freddy be a pure hallucination, and could that really make any sense? I mean, he seems to cause hallucinations for us, but is that him controlling them, or are they just appearing alongside him? Well, by definition, hallucinations are an experience involving the apparent perception of something not present. So they're sensory experiences that appear real but are created by your mind. They can affect all 5 of your senses as well, not just sight, and for example, you might hear a voice that no one else can hear in the room, or you can see an image that isn't real, or maybe even feel the texture of something that isn't actually there. I remember that as a kid, once I either was dreaming or hallucinated my basement being filled with boulders that I had to clean out. I don't know why I thought it was my job, but that kind of explains a lot now. My parents didn't see them though, and then just kept telling me to go to bed. They thought I was doing a bit or something, but this definitely explains a lot. Hallucinations though may be caused by mental illness, the side effect of medications, or physical illnesses like epilepsy or alcohol use. Not getting enough sleep can also lead to hallucinations. You may be more prone to hallucinations if you haven't slept in multiple days or didn't get enough sleep over longer periods of time, and it's also possible to experience hallucinations right before falling asleep, known as hypnagogic hallucinations, or right before waking up from sleep, known as hypnopompic hallucinations, which is why sometimes you may hear a voice or something that sounds like a voice while you're dozing off. But it's also not just limited to sleep. High fevers, migraines, social isolation, seizures, terminal illness, and high levels of stress can all also cause hallucinations. And honestly, based on the first game alone, I can see why we would have high levels of stress and probably be sleep deprived. I mean, our shift is from 12 to 6 AM, and that's only the part that we actually get to play, and I'm sure the working environment is pretty awful and we're alone the whole time, which not only increases the stress, but the feelings of social isolation as well. And that's only within the first game. If we want to talk about the series as a whole, we play as Michael Apted in basically every game, with the exception of a few. So we can use this to kind of understand what's really going on. In the cutscenes to Sister Location, we learn that Michael was used as a vessel to help Ennard and whoever was inside of Ennard to escape the underground facility that's the main setting for that game. However, in the process, we end up becoming purple from all the bruising, because you know, metal parts are moving inside of us, and the neighborhood we live in ends up becoming afraid of us. See the "you won't die" scene for proof of that one, because everyone is hiding behind their homes as we walk down the street and then eventually puke Ennard out. They start off loving us, waving and smiling, but eventually become terrified and actively avoid us. If that's not gonna start the feeling of social isolation, I don't know what is. And I know what is. And we know that the original games have to come after these events because we're not only sent here by our father, who would have a tough time doing this trapped in a secret room, but also because of the cited reasons for being fired at the end of the original games. Odor is always listed, meaning that we've definitely been through some rough patches. And it's also worth noting that in Sister Location, where the stress, social isolation, and probably the sleep deprivation begin, Golden Freddy doesn't appear as an animatronic, but instead as a reference in the custom night menu, which can't really be considered canon, because in the actual story of the games, you wouldn't be able to customize things. So, Golden Freddy only starts showing up after Michael goes through extreme trauma, and seems to only be seen by Michael. Golden Freddy doesn't show up anywhere in promotional material for any of the restaurants, even before the Bite of 87, since him causing the Bite of 87 could be considered the reason why they stopped promoting him. But even in FNAF 2, which is just before the Bite of 87, since it may even take place during the events of that week, we don't see any art for the new Golden Freddy. While he does appear in the post-Night 3 cutscene, these are also referred to as the end-of-night hallucinations, meaning that they obviously aren't real. But also, it's an interesting point of contention. Here you would think that that the theory would start to fall apart because, well, it's a hallucination. Yes, at this point in the game we're playing as Jeremy Fitzgerald, right? And while yes, during the main 5 nights we play as Jeremy, more on that later, that doesn't really mean that these hallucinations have to be his. Think about how the hallucinations are being presented, okay? They're the location from the first game, a game where we know we play as Michael Afton. Much like how Michael was part robot after his sister location fiasco, and we're inside the Freddy animatronic specifically, like how Michael would associate the character with the one who ended up killing his brother. And Golden Freddy shows up as another hallucination on top of that. These hallucinations are clearly meant to show us how Michael is figuring out what to do next. And not only are they showing the next location that he would go to, they're also what brings him to the FNAF 2 location. Notice how he sees the puppet after night 4 in game, and then we don't really get another end night cutscene, simply because by night 6 we're actually playing as Mike. Sure, we get a check that says that Jeremy worked overtime, but really? Making or even letting an employee work overtime after one of your animatronics removed his frontal lobe? Yeah, no, that check is cleverly disguised hush money from an already shady company. Michael gets there on night 6 and takes over, only to get fired shortly thereafter. On the pink slip it says on the first day, really? But that seems to be one of those I think thou doth protest too much kind of things. Like, why do you feel the need to point that out on this pink slip? The notes section is for reasoning behind the firing and explanations, especially in a legal sense, so those who get fired can't really try and file wrongful termination suits, or at least if they do, they won't really have much legs. We also know that Fritz Smith is Michael Afton using an alias since he gets fired for the same reasons Michael does in the first game. The logical extension of that being that they're the same person, who had to change their name again when they applied to the next place because, you know, the company would have a record of Fritz Smith being fired. And considering how Fritz is one of the missing children's names, yeah, it's meant to be a fake name. Nobody other than Mike seemingly can see Golden Freddy, and whenever we do see him, it's never operational, and it's never in a tangible sense. In all forms, Golden Freddy is slumped over, there's no light in his eyes, and he's always in our office. We don't see him on a camera at any point, so where the hell on earth could he have come from if he is using supernatural abilities to move himself? Some explain this in the first game by saying that he was hiding out in the kitchen since the camera wasn't working, but in FNAF 2, we don't have any cameras that aren't functional, so where on earth could he have come from? It doesn't make sense even with the FNAF universe logic. Hell, we even see Shadow Freddy on the cameras, but not Golden Freddy. Huh. Weird. Speaking of his weird abilities, what's with the whole crashing us to the desktop thing? Every other animatronic sends us to the main menu, but Golden Freddy sends us to our desktop. That's a very odd detail that I don't think anyone is really questioning, but it certainly seems to indicate that there is something special about this character. And I don't think that it's that they're just angrier than the other ones, because that wouldn't really change anything. I think it's more symbolic than that. You see, the only other character that when killing us crashes us to our desktop is Nightmare from FNAF 4, and that is not a coincidence. FNAF 4 is where we see the inciting moment that starts all of this trauma for Michael, where he feels guilty for getting his brother killed despite it not really being his fault. Sure, he put his brother's head in the animatronic mouth, but William is the one who made the mouth intentionally superpowered. When I've said this in the past, in previous videos, at one point someone used the analogy of if someone puts your hand under a hydraulic press and then your hand is crushed, it's not the person who made the hydraulic press's fault. And you know what? You're right, that's true. However, if that hydraulic press was designed to stop before it reached the hand, or it wasn't supposed to have enough power to actually crush a hand, then the manufacturer who gave it too much power or messed it up, it's them at fault. Or I guess technically a better analogy would be if your car's airbags don't deploy during an accident, since that's more realistic than a hydraulic press stopping. In a settlement reached following mediation, attorneys Alan Feldman, Daniel Mann, and Edward Goldis obtained a multi-million-dollar recovery on behalf of a teenage girl who suffered catastrophic brain injuries in a car accident. Her car slid off the road during a rainstorm and struck a tree broadside, and the head curtain airbags and the chest and thorax airbags in the vehicle failed to deploy during the accident. They could prove that if the car had been manufactured correctly, the girl wouldn't have suffered any injuries, and thus the company settled instead of taking it to court. court. The same principle applies here. Had this not have been William's own child, if the family who lost their kids sued William, he would have been cleaned out. But of course, Michael didn't know that it wasn't his fault at the time. He learned that after Sister Location, which sets him on his journey. But going back to the connection between Golden Freddy and Nightmare, they're the only two animatronics that crashes to the desktop. And while with Golden Freddy that may not make much sense, with Nightmare having the same ability, it sets a baseline for what's really going on when this happens. Nightmare in FNAF 4 is representative of death. He's the dark shadow that's coming after Crying Child during his coma in the hospital after the bite of 83. Notice how Nightmare is a shadow version of Nightmare Fredbear, Fredbear being the animatronic that he would be most afraid of, because you know, it's the one that crushed him. And his Ultimate Custom Night voice lines support this idea. Quote, "I am here to claim what is left of you. You will not be spared, you will not be saved, and I am your wickedness made of flesh." All of these are indicators that Nightmare is meant to be death, especially in FNAF 4. And when Nightmare gets us, we crash to the desktop. We truly die. Not like when the other animatronics get us and we go back to the main menu. This time around, we're actually jump scared to death. The same must be the case for Golden Freddy. And considering how Nightmare is in essence also a hallucination, it would make sense for Golden Freddy to be able to jump scare us to death as well. A death that doesn't involve violence, and instead your heart giving out due to fear, hence the desktop crash. Golden Freddy being a hallucination would not only explain a lot, but it would also help clear things up. Golden Freddy being a real animatronic allows for Cassidy to be the one you should not have killed, since she can possess William without us having to worry about who's in the suit. The "It's me" line also makes sense now, since it would be referring to the animatronic that killed Mike's brother, or it could even be Mike assuming that Crying Child went on to possess the Fredbear animatronic because Mike knows that Elizabeth is possessing Baby, and it makes sense why we can't see Golden Freddy on the cameras, why he's never advertised, but also why he would be haunting William in Ultimate Custom Night, since William would also see Golden Freddy as the one who took his son. Well, at least if it is William in Ultimate Custom Night, since with this revelation now, it could be Mike. Cassidy could still be possessing William, but someone else may be possessing Michael, causing him to suffer since he blames his big brother for his death. Michael being the Ultimate Custom Night player explains why we would still see Golden Freddy in the final cutscene. It makes sense with the dialogue of the Ultimate Custom Night death screens, and it explains why Spring and Scrap Trap are there, because why would William be haunting himself? He doesn't seem to regret anything he's done. Michael being possessed by Crying Child explains why he knows what Nightmare Fredbear looks like, since he draws it in the survival logbook, and it explains why Cassidy and Crying Child could communicate in that book. Not because they share an animatronic, but because they share a purpose, to punish those who did them wrong, or I guess to punish those they consider the causes for their death. And then it allows for Michael to be possessing Glamrock Freddy for his redemption, because Crying Child was keeping him alive through FNAF 6's fire. There you have it, friends. Golden Freddy was never real. I firmly believe that this is the case, and honestly, I want to hear your opinions about it as well, as long as they're respectful. I know they're not going to be. So be sure you let me know down in the comments. That's all the time we have for today, friends. Thank you all so much for watching. I have been and shall remain Connor Monroe, and I'll see you in another video. Golden Freddy's not real,